I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at financial planning professionals and also those who are looking to enter the financial planning profession. We will be talking during the podcast about all things Certified Financial Planner certification related, talking to other CFPs around the world, and also we will be dropping in on some new entrants who've just entered the financial planning profession, and we'll be checking up along the way on a regular basis with them to see how they're getting on. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. And today we are talking about the CFP certification. And I have a very special guest with me, and that is Dani Nicholls, who is a senior paraplanner at Cooper Parry Wealth. Hello, Dani.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. Now, we have lots and lots of things to talk about, don't we? I want to talk to you about your journey to gain your CFP certification, about why you did it, how you found the different parts of the process, and all of that kind of stuff, and all tips and things along the way that I'm sure that you are eager to share. But I want to start right at the very beginning. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the financial planning profession.
So I decided that I was going to study accountancy and finance at university. And whilst I was there, I didn't really enjoy the course very much, other than one module that I did on tax, which I actually did in place of a dissertation because I thought that coursework wasn't for me, ironically. And then later decided to do a CFP, which is, of course, a big bit of coursework.
Yes.
So after I finished uni, I decided that I wanted to work somewhere in the arena of tax and applied for jobs all over the country that had anything to do with tax. And the first job that I got that I liked the sound of was a trainee financial advisor.
Wow. And so you dive straight in, I guess. So you needed to do all your level 4 qualifications in, I guess, pretty short time as well by taking up a role like that, did you?
Yeah, exactly that. I had to pass RO1 within a month of starting the job in order to keep it, which I just about did. And then after that, I ploughed through the rest of the ROs, which were all with the CII. Yeah. And then I carried on with the CII for quite a long time after that.
Wow. Yeah. So you're another serial exam taker then, by the sounds of it, cramming them in.
Yeah, I think it probably took me about 3 years or so to do the diploma. Wow. So I'd say that's fairly standard with the CII. But then I moved on to do chartered and fellowship with the CII. And after I got that, I was looking for what else I could do. And that's where I found the CFP.
So I was going to say, why did you decide to do the CFP? How did you come across it? And, what was it that appealed? Was it about, for some people, it's about getting another qualification, and for other people, it's about, a test of application of their knowledge. What was it that attracted you to do the CFP?
A friend of mine sat it about 8 years ago, I'd say. And I remember at the time that I proofread it for her, and she was explaining to me what it was all about, and she showed me her case study. And it seemed interesting at that point in time, but I was too early in my career and my knowledge level to tackle it then. And since then, I've worked with a few CFP professionals, and they've all been very impressive people. So it's stuck in my mind. And the current company that I work for actively encourage it over other exams because of the way it teaches you to think about various areas rather than just one in isolation. And I decided at that point that it was time to challenge myself, because an exam I find relatively straightforward. You can revise for it, you can sit it, you pass it, and then you don't necessarily need to draw on that information again, potentially. Or if you do, you can Google it.
Yes.
Whereas something like a case study, you have to think about so many different moving parts. And that is more how I do my day job. Yeah. So why shouldn't I do that? And I should challenge myself to do the CFP.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating story about how you found the CFP. Really interesting, isn't it? How, when you're in the financial planning space and you're working for the right firms, they encourage you and support you. And also when you look around, the people I found, certainly when I did my CFP, the people around who I aspired to be more like, or, I thought of running great financial planning businesses, then they all seem to be certified financial planners as well, which is, kind of another push to push you in that direction, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I wanted to be seen like those individuals, and the people that I respected had it. So I wanted to have it as well.
Yeah, excellent. So, right. So tell us a bit about what happened. So you got your case study. So did you, just backing up a little bit, so if you were a fellow of the CII, I'm guessing that you didn't sit the level 6 exam. Is that right?
I actually did sit the level 6 exam.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, my CFP journey actually started a few years ago. I decided to attempt it in 2020, which is when it was transitioning from level 6 to level 7.
Uh-huh.
And I did sit the level 6 exam in, I think it was the March probably of 2020. And then I sat the case study twice and wasn't successful. And my personal experience of that sort of time was that it felt a bit neglected, and that the transition hadn't been quite as smooth as they'd expected.
Yeah.
And also for me at that time, obviously 2020, we're talking about COVID years, and it just wasn't clicking for me. It didn't fit into place. And so I decided to pause with it at that point in time and give it a couple of years to smooth out, both in terms of the change to level 7 and also for COVID to smooth out a bit as well.
Yeah.
And then early in 2023, I saw a webinar that talked about the best way to attempt the CFP if you're going to do it. And so I thought I'll listen to that. And that really invigorated my want to do it. And so I decided to have another go last year.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. And it's great that you were, you gave it a shot, but obviously, sometimes, things conspire against us, don't they? But you never actually gave up. And, to listen to other people talk about how great the CFP is, it's lovely to hear that you were, your inspiration was reinvigorated and you decided to roll your sleeves up and get that last bit under your belt. So tell us a little bit about your journey through the level 7 assessment. How did you find all of that?
To begin with, I wouldn't have had any chance at success unless I'd done your course. So that was definitely the key turning point for me. And it was mainly about the discussion on various different points and trusting my gut. So I remember a few conversations that I had with you where I've come up against a challenge and I talked to you about it, and you just let me talk for 5-10 minutes, and I talk myself in a circle and come back to the original answer I had.
Yep.
And you said, there you go, you've already made your decision. And I was like, yeah, okay, I have. I just need to go with that. So that was the biggest part for me, was just having to trust my gut.
Yeah.
And probably the other thing is that everything really overlaps with each other. So when you start playing with one area of the plan, it knocks onto 5 or 6 different areas that you didn't think it would. And it gets worse before it gets better, definitely. So It's kind of like decorating a house, I'll say, that you'd strip off the wallpaper and it looks like a complete mess of a shell, and then all of a sudden you start putting the paint back on and it comes together quite quickly.
Starts coming together, yeah. And I think that, that's a really great analogy. You kind of, I think I said to you in one of our one-to-ones that quite a lot of people, when they start the process, they're asking questions, but they don't, like you did, go around in a great big circle and answer your question. But as as our time together progresses, more and more people do what you were doing very early on, I must say. And that is going round in that circle, because it's forcing your brain to think critically about the process. But at the end of all of that, you have to make a decision, because if you don't keep making those decisions through the assessment process about how, what recommendations you're going to make in each of those particular areas, then you never get to the end, do you? You just end up in a big mess.
Absolutely, yeah. You just have to, at one point, you have to choose which strain you're going to go down and just stick with it. and then see what happens. And sometimes you do come up against a dead end and you have to go back and change it, but that's all part of the joy of it, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and it is. And so did you have a particular way that you planned out your time or, design on how to achieve your level 7 success?
I think I did a lot of handwritten notes, and that's the way that I'd work in a day-to-day, is that whenever I think about something and I want to look into it in more detail, I'd make a note of it and then come back to it later once I've finished my current train of thought. Otherwise, what I would do would dip into a lot of different areas and not solve any of them, and then just feel completely overwhelmed by it all.
Yeah.
So I think I had to follow through with each strain of thought and then come back to my other ones the intrusive ones that cropped up whilst I was trying to solve one problem.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Some of the other people on the courses, they describe it as kind of going down these rabbit holes, and you go down a rabbit hole if you let your brain, dart off in a different direction, and you go down this rabbit hole, you get to a dead end, you come back, you go down another rabbit hole, get to a dead end, come back. And it's a continuous cycle, or it can feel like a continuous cycle, can't it?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, that's a great tip for everybody else out there who is, thinking of embarking on their process, is to trust your gut and to stick with that one line of thought to start with and jot down some notes as you go, so you can pick up those, extra things that pop into your head along the way. But actually it doesn't distract you. And therefore, that must be in a very efficient way to use your time.
I'd like to think so, but it still took quite a long time.
Which we will get onto at the moment in a minute. So were there any particular areas of the case study or, the financial plan construction elements that you found the most tricky along the way? Any more challenging than any other ones?
I think that, to be honest, it was mainly following my thought process was the hardest thing. Once you've got your head around how to construct spreadsheets or cash flow, however you're going to use it, it was mainly the thought process and the thinking time that took the longest. And the other thing I would say is that not everyone is successful first time, as I well know. And the understanding the feedback that you get if you're in that position is also really valuable, because the knee-jerk reaction is to look at it and go, but I did include that, which is exactly what I did.
I remember.
But the assessor was quite right, that there was something that I'd misunderstood. And once I'd corrected that, I was successful. So I think that's probably the most challenging thing, is understanding what's expected of you and making sure that you meet those expectations.
Yeah, yeah. And it's quite easy, isn't it, when you get the feedback if you're not successful on your first attempt, although I have to say you were within a gnat's whisker away of passing. But it's still quite a frustrating process, because I think you kind of, you've put your heart and soul into it and all of those hours, and then you kind of get it back and it kind of feels like, as you said, well, I did do that. I definitely did do that. Until I think I said to you, to have the weekend off, not to, to calm down and just mull over it and then go back with fresh eyes, the following week and have a look at it. And then quite often you kind of think, yeah, that's fair dues. Yeah, I did do that. I did perhaps misinterpret something or made a mistake and just omitted something. And then obviously the consequences of the financial plan, the way that you build it, as you just mentioned, that you've got each bit is having a knock-on effect of something else. So if you made a mistake at the start, the feedback can feel, quite lengthy and quite cumbersome by the time, because that one mistake has had a knock-on effect elsewhere. So it can be quite a tough thing to get your head around, to get into the assessor's head so that you can get out exactly what is it that they're pointing out. But for you didn't have masses to fix, did you?
No, my main area that I needed to fix was the risk management. And I just completely omitted one area for no reason other than I just was overconfident that I'd already solved it, and I hadn't. And I reread the case study and thought, actually, that's a very fair point, and I'm going to change that now, which I did. And it took a while to thought that because, as you say, it knocks on with everything else, even though it was just changing one small area, I then had to redo my cash flow forecasts and amend a few bits in the plan. So it still took a fair bit of time, even though it was such a small area that was missed.
Yes, yeah. But the most important bit was that you persisted and you were successful, which is fantastic. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you very much.
So talking of time, looking back now, how long would you estimate that it took you to do the whole lot? So from getting your case study, starting the process, right through to a successful completion and gaining your CFP certification?
I would guess that it was between 100 and 120 hours or so that I spent on it, all in all.
Yeah.
Probably 80 to 100 on the first submission, and then another 20 or so on the second submission. So yeah, quite a decent amount of time.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, because what seems to come out in the people that we interview for the podcast is that, taking somewhere between 100 or around the 150 hour mark, 100 to 150 hours, if no matter how many submissions you do. So if for some people they did 150 hours on their first submission and passed, and other people kind of spread it out across 3 submissions, and it always seems to be, broadly in excess of 100 hours, but anywhere kind of around the 150 hour mark, if you add up all the time taken on all of the submissions. So it's really interesting how everybody seems to be broadly in the same ballpark, isn't it?
Yeah, that is quite interesting, actually. I hadn't realised that.
Yeah. So because you're a smart cookie, and, obviously taking the approach that you did, having that, those streams of thoughts and following them through, I think it certainly sounds like, you have saved time by doing that. But I think also, working in an environment like Cooper Parry Wealth that encourage the CFP and, engaging in that thought process, I think also is positive, isn't it? Because you're kind of immersed in it, not quite on a day-to-day basis, but, the principles of, comprehensive financial planning, pretty much on a day-to-day basis, aren't you?
Oh, definitely. I think it was one of the greatest helps that I had. That, as I said before, it was pretty much that my day-to-day job is doing these kinds of plans. So in some respects, I thought, oh, how hard could it be? And obviously quite hard.
Famous last words.
It was definitely a big help to me working in this kind of way before anyway. And it makes me think how we could improve things still within the business.
Yeah. And that was going to be my next question is that, now it's been a few months since you gained your certified financial planner assessment. And looking back now, are there things that you would want to change in the way that you do your job, as well as the way that you want to influence the way that Cooper Parry Wealth, as a company, does financial planning for clients?
Well, definitely for myself, it's made me relook at risk management, definitely, because I feel like protection is probably one of those areas that is a bit unloved in the industry, full stop. And it was definitely the area that I struggled on the most in my plan, which marries up basically. So it's somewhere that I think I need to take a lot more time in improving in both my own work and as well as implementing within our business as well.
Yeah.
And the other thing mixed into that was something really interesting that you said to me. And it was to do with investments that are completely outside of a client's risk profile, and in particular, directly held shares. And it was, why are we phasing this? Why are we prioritising selling over a number of years for using CGT allowances when actually it's completely outside of someone's risk profile? And that just flipped my way of thinking, because it's so drummed into us to use people's tax allowances, but never to look at the trade-off that it's outside of their risk profile. And that was a game changer for me.
Oh, excellent. Well, aim to please. We're aim to please. That's what we're here for. But, that's a really interesting conversation, isn't it? Because, when you say to a client, well, we can save you tax, but, as we said during our training together, the client is still, potentially massively exposed, depending on how big the portfolio is, from a risk perspective. So so many things in financial planning are all about a trade-off, aren't they? And about looking at different sides of the same coin and actually giving you the opportunity to have that discussion with the client and say, well, look, if we stagger it over 2 or 3 tax years, we can save you X amount in CGT, but during that time, this, X hundreds of thousands of pounds is, still outside your portfolio and the risk you want to take. And therefore, here's the alternative. It's all about those different strategies and alternatives, isn't it, really?
Yeah, definitely. And it's about that discussion with the client as well. It's all to do with their attitudes, and it's something that I think is probably a bit unloved as well at the moment.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, I read something somewhere the other day talking about the protection angles of things, and that, there's quite a lot of financial planning firms who say, things like, well, I've only done half a dozen protection cases in the last 10 years. And yet I was reading some research the other day that suggested that, as a population, we're massively underinsured, aren't we? I don't know whether that is those two statements really sit that well together, but I guess part of the explanation between that might be that, some clients are going to be naturally more wealthy, I guess, if they're seeking financial planning advice, aren't they? And so they might not actually need protection, but actually running the numbers and proving whether you do or not is probably the most important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And just deciding with them what they would prefer to do in terms of the different options and discounting them accurately.
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? Everybody's different and we're all different. We all approach financial planning in a slightly different way, which is great to see. So just looking forward now, what are your aspirations for the future? How do you think that the CFP will help you, in your job moving forward? Where do you see the future for Dani Nicholls?
I think the CFP will definitely help me because it's changed my way of thinking already. And also, as I mentioned, that Cooper Parry Wealth are very keen on getting the staff through the CFP as well, to bring everyone into the same way of thinking. And so I'd like to support other people through it now, as well as other qualifications, because quite frankly, I think all of them have got a very valid space in the industry.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably where my future lies.
Yeah. Being a supportive crew, which is excellent. And maybe you can read some of those other people who will come along behind you. You'll be in a position to be able to read their financial plans, and maybe help mentor them along the way, which will be great.
Yeah, hopefully.
So just to wrap up then, I just wanted to ask you one final question, if I may, and that is for a message for those people who are thinking about embarking on the CFP process over 2024. Do you have any tips or anything that you would like to share with them?
Yeah, so I would say treat it like a real client. So if you are doing this kind of work in your day-to-day, then get to know them inside and out, just like you would a real client. Talk to other people about it, whether that's in your team or whether it's people who are also sitting at the same sort of time or have sat it in the past, because they really challenge your ideas on it. And that's important. The other thing that I'd say is that when you do get to writing up your plan, make it as clear as possible for the assessor, because they can't mark something as there unless it's obvious to them. So list their objectives and how you've met them. And the final thing I would say is don't underestimate the time that it takes. So add in an extra month to what you expect you'll have it done in, because there's always going to be things that crop up.
Excellent tips there, Dani. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. I wish you well for 2024, with everything that you've got on. Thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to different people who have different experiences of gaining their certified financial planner certification, or maybe developing the financial planning profession at large. If you know anybody who you think might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, then please do pass on our details. That's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. See you again soon. Bye for now.